Imagine for a second, right, that you just win the ultimate lottery. And I don't just mean like paying off your mortgage or something. We are talking about astronomical, generational wealth here.
Right, like billions of dollars.
Exactly. Billions. Enough capital to just go out and buy an exclusive remote island. And because you deeply love your extended family, you decide to use this jackpot to execute the perfect rescue mission.
You want to save everyone.
Yeah. You move your siblings, your in-laws, nieces, nephews, all of them away from the grinding poverty you grew up in. You just scoop them up and place them in this sprawling, cedar-lined mansion to keep them safe forever.
Which, I mean, it sounds like the absolute dream scenario, doesn't it?
Right. It really does. But what if that perfect rescue mission ended up, like, completely destroying your family's sense of purpose?
Yeah, it forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question, I think.
Hmm.
Because we spend our whole lives viewing money as, the ultimate problem solver.
Oh, for sure.
But we rarely stop to examine the mechanics of what actually happens to human psychology when you solve so many problems that people, well, they literally no longer have a reason to strive.
That is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a brilliant new piece of literature published literally today, May 20, 2026.
That is so fresh.
It really is. It's a modern 4-act play by Farid Novin called The Boat Beyond the Cedars. And the source material we are working from today gives us this incredibly detailed look at the play.
Yeah, and it's just a masterful exploration of wealth, family dependency, and the profound psychological cost of, quote-unquote, escaping your past.
Definitely. And to start, we really need to get a feel for where this is taking place.
Right. The setting is crucial here. So we are placed in the San Juan Islands in Washington State.
Yeah.
And the narrative spans a full decade, jumping from 2002 to 2012.
And at the absolute center of this universe is Paul O'Reilly. He's this very charismatic tech billionaire, but he grew up as a Catholic country boy in rural South Dakota poverty.
Yeah, the real kind of poverty. Freezing winters, failing tractors. The playwright mentions the constant smell of diesel and just, eating boiled potatoes to survive.
Wow. Yeah, so he strikes it impossibly rich in the early tech boom and effectively buys this private paradise to house his entire family. He just wants to make sure they never have to experience that kind of struggle again.
Which is an incredible gesture.
It is. But okay, let's unpack this. Because on paper, Paul is the ultimate provider. But as I was reading through the breakdown of the characters, I hit a massive wall with Paul's brother-in-law, Daniel Mercer.
Yeah, Daniel is a tough one for a lot of people to get at first.
Right. I just really struggled to understand his bitterness. I mean, the man is living rent-free in a billionaire's mansion. Why is he so furious all the time?
Well, to really understand Daniel's anger, we have to look at what he actually traded for that rent-free mansion. Before the island, Daniel was a man who derived his whole dignity from his usefulness.
Okay, so his sense of self-worth.
Exactly. He didn't have money, which in this family is treated almost like a moral failing, right? But he had a distinct role. He was the kind of guy who could fix a broken engine. He coached the local baseball team. He made Thursday dinners.
It was necessary.
Yes, he was necessary to the people around him. And then they moved to this island, and suddenly Paul has, quote-unquote, people for everything.
Oh, right. The staff handles it all.
Precisely. And the playwright illustrates this with just a devastating anecdote in Act 2. Daniel is trying to explain his resentment to Paul, and he brings up this incident from the previous winter.
What happened?
Daniel's daughter, Anna, contracted pneumonia.
Oh, wow. Think about that for a second, especially if you are a parent listening to this. Your kid gets pneumonia. It is terrifying. Your instinct is to immediately step up, right? You handle the doctors, you fight with the insurance, you figure out the logistics to protect your child.
But Daniel couldn't do any of that. He didn't even have the authority to make the phone call to the hospital. He literally had to call Paul's assistant.
You're kidding. His own daughter.
Yeah, because the assistant's number is the one that actually gets answered at the hospital. Yeah. That's the number that wields the power and, holds the premium insurance account.
And I imagine the crisis is solved in, 5 minutes, right?
Instantly. Annie gets a private room, world-class doctors, someone magically caters their meals. She is totally fine.
But Daniel is just sitting there in the hospital chair, realizing that his own daughter's survival begins and ends with his brother-in-law's wealth.
Right. And he tells Paul that he feels like he's just become furniture in a life he didn't design. It completely strips away his basic human agency.
That is so rough.
It is. And we see this mirrored in another brother-in-law, Thomas, who used to be a skilled mechanic.
Yeah.
But on this island, There are literally no engines for Thomas to fix.
Because everything is brand new.
Exactly. New and maintained by professional staff. So Thomas suffers from what the playwright brilliantly calls elegant idleness.
Elegant idleness. That is such a great phrase. It actually makes me think of those well-intentioned invasive plant species.
Oh, how so?
Well, you introduce this beautiful, robust plant to a garden because you want it to flourish, but it's so dominant that it accidentally spreads over everything and just chokes out the entire native ecosystem.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Yeah, Paul's generosity feels exactly like that invasive plant. It really makes you ask, at what point does radical generosity cross the line into accidental tyranny?
I love that analogy because an invasive plant kills the native species by monopolizing all the sunlight and the soil nutrients. And that is exactly the mechanism of Paul's wealth. He monopolizes the family's ability to solve their own problems.
Right, they can't even get some sun.
Exactly. And the real tragedy is that Paul isn't doing this out of malice. He honestly believed that his immense intelligence and his money were a form of immunization.
He's trying to cure them of the South Dakota poverty.
Right, he looked back at those terrifying economics of their childhood and thought he could build an impenetrable fortress against hardship. But by removing the weight of the world, he accidentally caused his family's soul's muscles to atrophy.
Wow, soul's muscles.
Yeah, if you never have to carry a load, your muscles just waste away.
Okay, so we've established that this family is quietly rotting from the inside out, but they are completely insulated, right? I mean, they can't even complain because the person suffocating them is literally handing them luxury on a silver platter.
It's a gilded cage.
Totally.
Yeah.
So how does a playwright actually show all this unspoken, trapped resentment on stage? Because reading the source material, suddenly we get these very physical, mysterious manifestations on the island. And I have to ask, is this a ghost story? Are we crossing into magical realism here?
It definitely flirts with the supernatural, yeah. But the playwright grounds it entirely in psychological realism. The environment itself basically begins to reflect the family's internal crisis.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the most prominent example of this is the sudden appearance of this unmanned, centuries-old wooden boat on the western shore of the island.
It just washes up in the fog, right? No engine, no running lights. I think the text said there were no footprints on the sand to show someone dragged it there either.
Nothing. It's just there. In Act 1, Paul goes down to the water alone in the middle of the night. He wades into the freezing water, looks inside this rotting boat, and finds his dead mother's wooden rosary.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's just coiled in 6 inches of seawater at the bottom of the boat.
Which is a huge shock because Paul explicitly remembers watching that exact rosary being buried with his mother 11 years prior back in South Dakota.
Yes, it's a profound moment.
Okay, so a buried rosary magically teleports to an empty boat in Washington state. How do the characters even process this without losing their minds?
Well, the playwright introduces 2 characters to act as the grounded interpreters of these weird events. That's Elias and Miriam Makah.
They're the cooks on the island, right?
Yes, they are the elderly cooks, and they're indigenous to the Pacific Northwest. Now, the source text gives a very specific note to directors here, which I think is so important.
What's the note?
It says, Elias and Miriam must absolutely not be played as mystical shamans. They are fiercely practical people. They simply possess the rare gift of paying attention.
I love that. And Miriam says something that completely reframed the whole haunting thing for me. She doesn't gasp at the boat or claim it's a curse or anything. She just simply tells Paul that the boat is a question your family carries.
What's fascinating here is how the physical object serves as a mirror for their paralysis. If you look at Paul's youngest sister, Clara, she is a trained artist, but she actually stopped painting 2 years after moving to the island.
Yeah, she tells Paul she couldn't make a painting feel like a real thing in the world anymore. She said it just looked like a painting of a thing. The authenticity of it just vanished.
Right. But she does sketch the mysterious boat.
She does. And when Paul asks her why she can only draw this spooky boat, she says it's because the boat represents the question of whether love is enough.
Exactly. Because Clara can no longer paint reality because she is no longer living in reality. She is living in an artificial construct, which is Paul's island.
It's all fake.
Yeah, Clara cannot synthesize life onto a canvas because the ground beneath them is fundamentally fake. The boat is literally the only real thing that has breached their perimeter.
So their insulation is flawless on the inside, but completely fragile on the outside, which perfectly brings us to the moment that insulation is tested by a massive external force.
Right, the real world comes knocking.
Big time. We jump to the autumn of 2008. The financial world is violently collapsing. We see newspapers scattered around the mansion screaming about Lehman Brothers and this massive tech sector bloodbath. The real world is officially burning down.
And Paul, the architect of this whole sanctuary, is watching his wealth just vaporize in real time. He's been away for days, and he realizes that this incredible fortress he built, he actually calls it a cathedral out of electricity.
That phrase, a cathedral out of electricity, that is incredible.
It really is. He realizes it was entirely vulnerable. The immunization failed.
Because it implies something massive and dazzling, but the second someone unplugs the cord, it just ceases to exist. It has zero physical permanence.
Right.
And precisely as his financial world is crashing, this massive, violent storm hits the island. Horizontal rain, cedars bending in half, and the wooden boat returns. But this time, it carries a passenger.
Yeah, this is where the psychological thriller really collides with a spiritual reckoning.
Okay, wait, let me make sure I understand the mechanics of the scene because it's wild.
Yeah.
The passenger is Father Benedict, right? A 70-year-old, half-deaf former priest who used to be their pastor back in South Dakota.
That's the one.
And he is sitting in this ancient boat, soaking wet, holding a broken lantern with both hands as if it's still giving off light. He is perfectly calm, but completely bewildered. Did he literally float across the Pacific Ocean in a rowboat with no motor during a hurricane?
Well, the physical impossibility of his arrival is kind of the point. The play forces the family and, the audience to confront the impossible emotional reality they've been ignoring for years.
So the how doesn't matter.
Right. The logic of how he got there matters way less than the catalyst he brings with him.
Right, because he pulls out this water-damaged envelope, and inside is a letter written on Paul's personal stationery, in Paul's actual handwriting. And it is just one sentence long.
Please come before everything disappears.
Yes, but Paul never sent that letter.
That's the devastating reality. He might have physically penned it in a dark moment of despair alone in his office, but his pride never let him mail it. Yet somehow the ocean or the universe delivered this cry for help that Paul wouldn't let himself send.
And here's where it gets really interesting. They get the priest inside, they dry him off, pour him some whiskey, and Paul finally drops his guard. They sit by the fire, and Paul confesses his ultimate crisis of faith. He admits that he always thought the universe was a quote-unquote just accountant.
Yeah, this is a worldview you see all the time, particularly with highly successful people. It's the belief in a strict ledger system.
Like keeping score.
Exactly. The idea that fairness is proportional. If you work twice as hard, you are rewarded twice as much. If you engineer everything perfectly, you are guaranteed safety. Paul operated his entire life and built this entire island based on that ledger.
And I think a lot of us listening right now operate on that exact same ledger. We think if we just eat right, save enough money, make the smart choices, we can basically buy our way out of tragedy.
We all want to believe that.
But now Paul is losing the company. He's losing the island. His family resents him. The ledger is broken. And Father Benedict delivers this incredibly profound insight.
He really does.
He tells Paul that fairness isn't proportional. It is relational. God isn't keeping a ledger. He's keeping a conversation.
And that distinction, that is the philosophical core of the entire play. Benedict is explaining that the universe doesn't operate on a vending machine logic, right?
But in hard work, get out success.
Exactly. Where suffering is a punishment for a mistake or wealth is a reward for hard work. That's not how it works. The point is that nothing goes unreceived. As Benedict says, everything is held.
Everything is held. But how does that actually help Paul in this moment, practically speak? I mean, he's still losing everything.
Well, it allows Paul to reframe his entire existence. It means his failure to maintain the island isn't some cosmic punishment. Giving his family 6 safe years on an island, even if it ends, even if they were angry about it, it is not a failure.
It's just a chapter.
Yeah, it was just one phrase in the long conversation of his life. And to hear the next part of the conversation, he has to let the island go.
And you'd think losing $1 billion sanctuary is the ultimate tragedy. But as we move into the aftermath of the play, it becomes super clear that losing the island is the exact cure this family desperately needed.
Oh, absolutely. So we jump forward to Act 4, which is the winter of 2012. The grand experiment is over. The house is full of boxes and covered in white sheets. The island has actually been sold to an investment consortium.
And the playwright throws in a great piece of irony here, right? Because the consortium is going to use the island for corporate team-building retreats.
It's perfect.
The ultimate safe haven is becoming a playground for rich executives to pretend to struggle in nature.
It's brilliant. But our real focus is on the family's healing, because the bitter, emasculated Daniel from Act 2 is completely unrecognizable now.
He is transformed. He found a job down in Oregon doing historical restoration. He is actually rebuilding old structures, using his hands again. His anger is completely gone. It's like someone finally opened a window in a stuffy room and let the fresh air in.
Yeah, and Daniel is actually the one who gives Paul the ultimate gift of clarity here. He admits he spent years building this internal legal case against Paul, just nursing his resentments, while Paul was honestly just trying to keep everyone safe.
Right.
But then Daniel articulates the overarching metaphor of the play. He talks about the necessity of scattering.
And this connects so perfectly back to our invasive plant analogy from earlier. Daniel compares families to seeds. He tells Paul, if you take a handful of seeds and plant them in the exact same hole, in the same small patch of dirt, what happens?
They don't grow well.
Right, they don't form a super plant. They fight each other for nutrients. They literally strangle each other trying to reach the sunlight. You have to scatter the seeds so each one gets its own sun.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Daniel's realization echoes what Elias Makah tells Paul on their very final night on the island.
Oh, I love this scene.
Paul is standing by the water, looking out at where the mysterious wooden boat used to appear, and he's just mourning the loss of his paradise. And Elias simply comes up and says, places end. That's what places do.
Places end. That's what places do. It's such a simple truth, but it goes against all of our human instincts. We want permanence for the people we love. We want to build them an indestructible island.
Of course we do. But Elias and Daniel are both telling Paul the exact same thing. Letting go of control is actually the only way to preserve the truth of a family.
Friction, purpose, struggle, they aren't enemies you should shield your loved ones from.
No, not at all. They're the vital components that give human life its dignity.
It really makes you turn the mirror on yourself. I want you, listening right now, to just think about the dynamics in your own life. What island of safety or control are you currently building for the people you love?
It's a hard question to ask yourself.
It is. Are you trying to manage your kids' lives so perfectly, fixing every problem before it even starts, that they never actually learn how to fail? Are you financially insulating a family member to the point where they've lost their own drive?
Yeah.
Is it possible that by trying to shield them from the weather, you are planting them way too close together and depriving them of their own sunlight?
It's a very confronting realization. The bow beyond the Cedars suggests that true love sometimes requires allowing the people you care about to face the storm.
Yeah.
To let Thomas fix his own engines. To let Daniel make his own phone calls when the pneumonia hits.
Because if you step in and solve everything, you just end up with a house full of elegant idleness and unspoken resentment. Farid Novin uses the backdrop of a tech billionaire's purchased paradise to prove that human beings simply aren't designed for permanent ease. We are fundamentally designed to strive.
The emotional journey of this play is just profound. We go from the illusion of absolute security through the haunting manifestations of all that suppressed agency into the violent collapse of that artificial world, and finally, to the peaceful, necessary scattering of the seeds.
It's an incredible piece of writing, and as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, drawn straight from the playwright's introductory notes. Farid Novin describes the Pacific Northwest setting of this play as a quote-unquote Catholic landscape.
Right, and he clarifies what he means by that. He says it's a place where faith and history are everywhere present, but nowhere explicitly acknowledged.
Like a ghost.
Exactly. It lives in the fog rolling off the water, and it lives deep in the bones of the people.
It's the things we carry that we refuse to say out loud. It's the past we buried that keeps washing up on our shores in an empty wooden boat. So think about your own physical and emotional environment.
What's haunting you?
Right. If our surroundings hold the unspoken beliefs of our past, what invisible fog is dictating the rules of your own life right now? Are you frantically building a cathedral out of electricity just to escape a childhood memory? Are you sailing a boat whose origins you refuse to see?
That is such a powerful question to carry with you.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep examining the structures you are building, keep looking for the sunlight, and keep questioning the waters around you.